Okay, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, sure. Kia ora, everyone. Just quickly, again, literally off the top of the head, and without election results being finalised, I think some of the first direct impact of the policy settings within the framework of a national act and or New Zealand First government is that the impact on fares. I think that's one of the first things that we need to consider. We did introduce some free fares for students as per government policy recently, and they're likely to be taken away. And that might be something that we need to do with some urgency before Christmas. So I think operationally that gives us a bit of a challenging environment to get that done. In the wider context, I think for passenger transport, it's largely status quo. So there's nothing in the current policy set that is going to bring about sort of immediate winds of change. I think the GPS for transport will be in place. It'll affect the next investment round, which is in the next NLTP period, and we'll start to see the ship to turn there, particularly with the way that Waka Kotahi investments on based on the government's GPS policy at that time. And so there's a little bit of a time for us to look to see that transition and to react to it as a group, but particularly with public transport. The policy sets are pretty strong on public transport in terms of investment, and we don't see any sort of immediate change apart from the fares in its first instance.
Thank you. So we move on to the minutes, which is on page of the previous meeting, on page 9. This is the meeting that was held on the 16th of August. First of all, someone moved it true and correct. Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner Chair. Madam Ann. And your second, Commissioner Selwood, thank you. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Are there any matters in there that you want to raise? There's been none. Everybody's in a hurry today. So we move then to the presentation. I think we're up to, yes, we are. So Sean, are you are there? We open the floor to you. Just introduce yourself, Sean, and then we'll get an update from you.
Sure.
Yep. Ready to go.
Hi, everybody. Yep, I'm Sean Jones, PSP program. So my role is I work with the PSP partnership and facilitate that partnership and develop a program of transport infrastructure needed to support the connected communities strategy and smart growth. So today I'm going to be sharing with you some work we're doing at the moment through Waka Kotahi, which is around the urban programs or VKT reduction program. Okay. So if we can go to the next one. No. I'm going to run through and know what the programs are, our approach, some technical detail around the gap, and then what the program approaches we're going to be following. So, slide, please. We'll cover. Yeah, I've got 20 minutes, I think, so I'm going to try and get through the slides within about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll have a little bit of time for questions if there are any. So we're going to talk about what VKT is and where it came from, what is an urban program, our approach in the Western Bay. Each of the Tier 1 growth areas are doing things slightly differently. What's the gap between the smart growth strategy and the MOT targets? How can we affect change, and where are we up to and what's happening next? Next slide, please. So in terms of the strategic context, out of the first emissions reduction plan, there was the government set targets. One of those targets was to reduce local vehicle kilometres travelled by light vehicles by 20% by 2035. And so that's essentially the target that we've been set. By 2035, reduce the VKT by 20% based on forecasted projected VKT. And sitting under that were several actions. One of those was supporting people to walk, cycle and use public transport. And the action out of there is to develop a VKT program for major urban areas. And that was reduced to tier 1 only. So we've got Auckland, Hamilton, Tauranga, Wellington and Christchurch currently preparing these VKT programs. Next slide. And I thought this is quite a nice, concise description of what an urban program is. So it identifies activities required to contribute to the national VKT reduction target, the funding required to deliver them at scale and pace required, and the critical dependency targets, the broader benefits delivered. So that's essentially what the program is. Our approach, so we have, we're working under SMICRO. The advice was to use the Growth Partnership as a forum for working this through. So on the left, you can see the way that we're working. We have several work streams that are shown on the left. This picture on the left is from the expression of interest, and we actually have a few other work streams now that are shown on the right. So we've C&E, communications and engagement. TDM is travel demand management, and then the others are land use, iwi, managed lanes and pricing. So we have a working group, and that working group is representing all of those work streams, and we work through the technical detail, running a series of workshops as we build up the long list and short list of options, and ultimately develop up the programs for consideration. Next slide, please. So here's the timeline. We're currently in the middle of October, so we've undertaken the gap assessment, initial option. Phase 1, options phase 2 was taking those initial, we did some very high level brainstorming. We've pulled it back down into a series of themes, and now we're working through evaluating those by the end of the year. The plan is to have 4 programs, which I'll talk through. Those 4 programs will have a lot more detail in them, and then reporting happens from January through to March. So next slide, please. So now we're going to I'm just going to talk you through some of the details here. So the gap, which is an important thing to understand. So we have the targets to reduce VKT by 21% by 2035. So it's what you can see on the page is on the first column is our baseline, so it's 2019, and then 2035 projected values 1971. Then the TSP program is a slight reduction on those projected targets because there's a focus on multimodal, but because the city grows, the VKT grows from the baseline up to the 2035 program. And then the target is on the right-hand side, which is 1557. So essentially, we need to grow the city to meet the VKT target. You need to grow the city and keep the VKT more or less the same, and that's a challenge. So next slide. This shows the yes.
Just that scale on the left of that chart.
Is your speaker on? Or bring it closer.
That scale on the side of the chart there, Sean, that's millions of kilometres, isn't it, in the previous chart?
Yes.
So we're talking 1.9 billion kilometres.
Yes.
Just in that context.
Is that? Yeah, it will be millions, yeah. So this slide here shows, this is an analysis of the breakdown of on the left you've got modal, so you've got buses, cars, bikes, and walking, and you've got the national in grey and the Tauranga in green. The average trip length, that's important because when you look at the right hand side, so trip length versus emissions, only 25% of the trips are over 10 kilometres, but they contribute to 65% of your total emissions. And then 50% of your trips are under 5 kilometres, and they're 15% of the total emissions. So this starts to help us see where we need to focus the effort in order to affect your VKT. It's assuming emissions being a proxy for VKT, just it's a rough estimate. So if we go to the next slide. This is a breakdown between TCC and Western Bay of Plenty district councils. On a similar concept, this is percentage of total trips on the left side of each of these, and the trip length ranges, the trip length range. And then on the right hand side, the percentage of total VKT. So you can see there's two key things in here really to see. In TCC, between the trips of between 2 to 25 kilometres, you're getting just over 80% of the trips of the VKT. And then if you remember back to the previous slide, the average length for modes, it's sort of the cycling and buses are really the ones that are sitting in those distances. And then on the Western Bay, the trip length, where there's the majority of VKT, there's a bit of a shift into the longer distance trips, which makes sense considering the layout of the Western Bay. Next slide. And this is, I think, the last slide on any technical detail. So this demonstrates the split of VKT between the Western Bay of Plenty and TCC. So it shows you that within the TCC area, roughly 3/4 of the VKT is generated. So it's better to focus. So, and that we haven't shown this slide, but there's a slide that we've looked at the different scenarios. You can focus on a 50-50 effort between Western Bay and TCC versus maybe pushing it a bit more into TCC area, and you'll get a lot better bang for buck, which is fairly intuitive with those numbers. So if we go to the next slide. So I put this slide in here, and I don't need to go through all the
just Mike, let's ask you a question.
Sure.
Excuse me, through you, Mr. Chair. But I think, Sean, one of the things I'd like to hang around with that data just quickly is just to bring out those insights around the trip length and sort of the mode, that it sort of starts to prioritise the role of those modes in the transport system. I think Western Bay and Tauranga City Council transport systems operate as one. I think that's fairly clear, and the demand profile across that system is what it is. I think what's quite pertinent from the work and very useful, I think, for our planning, particularly in the PT space, but also the transport system space, is the length of those journeys. So maybe drop a slide or two backwards. It just shows that sort of 2 to 25k zone is a sweet spot really for around VKT and the bulk of it. And the role of each mode in that area helps to affect the VKT and by proxy emissions. But I think a focus on VKT, the length of trips and the type of modes that might be useful in that space is particularly enlightening from this work that you're doing. So I think it's something to highlight, and it helps us to plan going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That's a good point. So so as I was saying, I put this slide up, not really to read through the detail, though you're welcome to But what we have here is on the left-hand column, as part of the work what Kotahi's doing, they've identified the 3 big shifts that are really going to affect VKT. So you've got urban form, making shared and active modes more attractive, and motivating people to travel differently. And then through our work of the long listing and short and then essentially our long listing, we've come up with themes of initiatives that we believe are able to be, or that could affect VKT if they were implemented. And so what we've done is line up those themes with the shifts, and then again there's examples in here of specific things that are interventions that could be put into programs. And this is not the exhaustive list. I think we end up with about 120 different possible activities, but these are examples. So if we go to the next slide, what we have talked at length about is how to articulate the programs, because we need to develop up options, and our plan is to provide, we have to demonstrate one program that will achieve the VKT target. But thinking back to one of the early slides, achieving that target is a significant barrier, and we don't want to put all of our effort into showing multiple programs that deliver the target if they're all going to be unrealistic. So what we're doing that is going to provide visibility into the envelope of the possible outcomes that you could do through your investment is develop up 4 programs to start with. So we're going to have, and we're framing it up around the TSOP or the TSP program. So our reference program will be the endorsed TSP program, and program 2 will build on that program, accelerating some program activities that have an emphasis on VKT and behavior change, pricing, and essentially these are going to be the things that we think have a lot of bang for buck, and you could easily reprioritize to get some quick wins and good outcomes. Program 3 is going to be the same as program 2, with additional investment in PT, walking and cycling and other incentives. So you're pulling, I've been thinking about this like it's like we've got a whole lot of levers. We've got urban growth, we've got infrastructure investment, behavior change and TDM, we've got pricing. So what we're doing in program 3 is we're starting to pull on those levers a bit more and identify where there's some priority investment that you can make. And then program 4 will be program 3, but it'll have major land use changes and associated infrastructure. So this is essentially doing everything we think you could possibly do with unconstrained investment, unconstrained legislative and policy environments, and unconstrained political will. So essentially what I've shown on the right is these programs are going to be the barriers to delivery and the benefits of doing them in terms of VKT reduction will be increasing as we go through those programs. So it provides a good envelope and a good narrative that we can start to build on in terms of having those conversations. And then just one other thing to add to this, we think it's possible that once we've done this work, there may be a hybrid type program that comes out of it, because we'll start to see how effective different levers are in terms of how they might affect VKT, and we might find actually there's a program 3A or program 2A that's going to be the most effective one to put forward as probably the best overall program if you really want to affect VKT within a reasonable funding envelope. So next slide. So our next steps, we're going through at the moment and looking at our options. We're looking at our long list and pulling them into a short list and developing up those 4 programs that I've just described there. And we'll be evaluating those through to December. We have an ongoing program of engagement through the TSP governance and or management and governance and smart growth management and governance. So we've got about maybe 5 or 6 different meetings that lead us towards the end of the year, where smart growth will be meeting with SAG. We've got to inform the RTC on the integration with the RLTP, because there's a need in the RLTP to articulate the funding requirements of alternative funding sources like SURF fund and what have you. And then from January through to March, we'll be building up the reporting part of the project, with a plan to have it finalised at the end of March or early April. So I think that's the last slide. That's that. Any questions or discussion that you want to have?
Before we go to questions, can I just welcome Jess Andrews from Wakakatahi. This is your first official meeting here, and we're really happy to have Wakakatahi. You're a major funder for PT, and we felt that it was really important that you were at the table, albeit not as a voting, but it seemed to be a gap, and so we agreed as a committee to put it to our respective councils to invite you, and we welcome. Do you have anything to say before we go to the?
No, but thank you very much for having me. Sorry, I was late to my first official meeting.
That's okay. Questions to Sean?
I don't know where to start. We'll let you go. Okay, so as one of the tier ones, I can tell you that the metros are united in the fact that they are never going to be able to meet the VKT reductions. They don't agree with the distribution that's been made, even though Tauranga got a reduction. But what they are focused on, and which appears nowhere in there, is emissions reduction. So, you know, very happy and very happy to have targets on emission reductions, but just don't see any way of being able to reduce VKT. And I'm sorry, but the political will is going to be really difficult, you know, as we all know, to convince people based on vehicle kilometres travelled. I think by and large, the community is starting to buy into reduction of carbon, reduction of emissions, but I just don't see any evidence that anyone understands VKT, and certainly from a tier 1 perspective, we just don't see any way as a growing city that we're ever going to be able to meet that without major changes. We can do that over time, but we're never going to do it in the time.
Thanks, Anne. Just one comment on that. We had our working group meeting this morning, and we were talking about exactly the same thing. How do we bring in emissions reduction into our program explicitly, and whether we can do that, and whether we can the feedback at that conversation, because we've got what Kotahi team in there, is at the moment they're thinking we should just continue as per the scope of the VKT program, but there's conversations happening on how to bring in emissions. So what we're thinking about is, and this is how we're approaching this program, we don't want it to just be only for the VKT, because there's investment, there's a lot of investment going into developing these programs, and we want to make sure that anything that comes out of it can be used regardless of what happens to VKT policy. For example, the managed lane study is going to be a valuable asset that's coming out of this work. It's going to inform decisions around how to optimize the network. So, I understand what you're saying, and I agree. And we're trying to think about how we can bring that into the narrative that we're developing in terms of the program.
Councillor, Commissioner.
Yeah, I totally agree with that conversation. If you go back to the slide that showed the VKT, and it showed that we're currently heading to about 1.9. Keep going back, I think one more. So the MOT projection is that we'll go to 1.971. The TSP brings that down to 1919. That's with a significant investment in public transport, walking and cycling and TSP, much of which is currently unfunded. So the reality of our current context is that even with the best planning that we've got in place, we can only bring it down to 1.19, assuming that we can get it funded, let alone coming to 1557. So that whole focus on VKT, and if we get a mindset around that, I think we end up chasing red herrings. And I think what we really, to Anne's point, we've got to totally focus on carbon reduction. That is an enormous challenge in its own right. But given that, is all the more reason why we need to focus on the end goal, not the proxy for it, which is a poor proxy. And we've had a change of government. I'd be very surprised if they don't knock the VKT reduction targets on their head pretty quickly, with a focus on carbon reduction, so that if the team can set their minds more on achieving that goal sooner rather than later, I think that's a better outcome. Otherwise, we'll go chasing rainbows and spend a lot of wasted energy doing so.
Councillor Thompson.
I don't worry about it, I'll speak loudly.
No, they won't hear it.
Well, firstly, to Chair Holly's point, I'm a little bit bemused if that's the view of the metros, how this program is wandering off, spending goodness knows, I don't know how much on this. Where is the integrated governance giving the direction on this? Certainly from a regional council perspective, our focus is on emissions reduction, carbon reduction, and I totally agree with the former comments that the communities are slowly buying into that. My second point is the underfunded nature of this, and we are about to sit down, hear submissions on the Smart Growth Strategy, which is a 50-year strategy, and then in March of next year there will be a Smart Growth funding and implementation plan. So where are those two, vital funding strategies? Where are they meeting in the middle? Because it seems to me that they're not meeting anywhere at the present point in time. So I have to say, from an investment point of view, unless we can, as a sub-region, come up with some really good, sustainable alternative forms of funding, particularly transport infrastructure, we're singing in the wind. So we've got some major challenges on our hands. A new chair will know only too well what our PT challenges are in terms of funding. So I have to put my hands up and say I'm just a bit surprised that this work seems to have, got a tail of wind behind it, and it just to me is not integrated with our other long-term strategies, particularly our funding strategies. Thanks.
Like to comment, Sean?
There is a disconnect between this program and the growth strategies. I acknowledge that, and I believe the reason that Wakate and Ministry of Transport are driving this is because it shapes up what decisions need to be made if we were to pursue that outcome. So it's an academic piece of work. It's not meant to redefine the urban environment in itself, but it informs what sort of scope of change would be needed to deliver the outcome. It's an early piece of work that's going to inform decisions in the future. If it'll inform decisions, it's not making decisions. It's not saying which way you should make the decision, but it's going to inform what the consequences of a particular decision would be.
The country has clearly signalled that they want a change of direction and ideology versus pragmatism. Pragmatism is what they're looking for, and so I have to concur completely with Councillor Thompson. wonder, and maybe Jess, I know it's early days on a new government in, but and it will take time for funding. But what we've been trying to say to our staff in the last 3 to 4 months is please stop working on things that still that look as if they are possibly subject to change and could be wasted. Can we just not just stall them so that we're not spending big licks of money unnecessarily? And it's not that your work's not good, and there will be value there in knowing, but the playground has changed, and I'm really concerned, as is Councillor Thompson, that it could all be for very little in the end if we don't get a coordinated approach. So we need help. And Jess, I don't know if you want to comment from a NZTA point of view on that.
Yeah, I guess I want to comment from a NZTA and from a TSP perspective on a couple of things. And one, I would say, obviously, so the program at the moment is being governed kind of through TSP, particularly by Brendan, Mike and myself, and we've been very conscious of this upcoming change, but there's also been statutory deadlines for these plans. So it hasn't been feasible to simply say, no, we're not going to do any work on this. But what we have done, which Sean touched on briefly, is do stuff that is no regrets, stuff that is focus the work, particularly around the managed land study, things that we need to do no matter what, that are going to give us information to inform our planning decision making. That isn't, ideological and driven purely from that, but saying actually there are things we can do. One of our biggest fears has been that we create a program that's so terrifying the whole baby gets thrown out with the bathwater, and that's why we've asked him to do it in a few different program scenarios, because there will be bits in here, no matter what the target, that are actually valuable for our region, and we've been given funding to do this work. So there is an opportunity in this. And we're trying to take as pragmatic a view with that as we can in the context of the requirements that have been set for us. And I think, there is definitely elements in here which are going to provide us really useful information to move forward and which feed into things we need to do anyway. So I don't think it's we need to stop straight away. I think it is let's get the good things we can out of here that we need to do. But yes, we're all very much walking that fine line and have been for a couple of months on the current expectation may not be the expectation by the time this is now due, which is middle of next year.
Commissioner.
I think, and I said it before, what's missing in here is that interrelationship between the reduction of EKT and the reduction in emissions. Yeah. And I think if, because it is good work, and I accept Sean saying it's academic, but none of that analysis actually becomes irrelevant. But that's not showing, that emissions reduction, carbon reduction is not showing. And if that's added into it, I think it will be extremely valuable, no matter what the incoming government does. And you're right. I understand you did have a statutory responsibility to do it, Sean, and you've done a good job. But that's the missing bit, and I think if that's in it, then this becomes a really helpful, reasonable piece of research that will come to. I'm a bit worried to hear, Sean, we're going to have 4 or 5 meetings before Christmas, because I know what my diary looks like, and it sure doesn't include that. But however,
I think there's only one. There's only one for you.
Right. Yeah, but we might need to talk to a few of our people to make sure that we're all on the same page from the sound of it. But I think if you can bring that lens into it, that will make it much more helpful to us. And then one of your slides showed that one on your when you had your programs, that you had some ways to stop growth. And if you've got some ideas around how to do that, I can tell you from Tauranga Commission, we would be very grateful to know what those tools might be.
I didn't know how to stop growth. I would just say there's a couple of thoughts I've had. So this is fully funded by out of the Surf Fund through Wakatahi. So the partnership are not funding this, just to be clear. It's not coming out of the balance sheet of councils. And I just wanted to, I've mentioned the managed lane study, but we're also installing, I think it's 13 Bluetooth sensors, which has been able to be funded through this program. And we're developing up the travel demand management scope, which was something that was happening in the background. And we've got some additional funding in there for doing some early work on the variable ride pricing and accelerating that. So and just reinforcing what Jess said, we definitely tried to make this as practical as possible in terms of how we make those investments.
Okay, look, I think we've gone over our time on this anyway. Thank you very much for your presentation, Sean, and we'll move on. We don't need to receive a report for that, do we? It's just a presentation.
Thanks, Sean.
So do we have some Google updates?
We do.
Yeah. And so the next one is the Willow Street bus update. And that's going to be presented by you, Mike.
Yes, I'm going to dutifully hand this over to Ollie to give a quick update on that one, being close to the issue.
Thank you, Mike. Through you, Mr. Chair. So we were given clear instructions at the last meeting of this committee to resolve this issue, and I'm pleased to report that 5 working days after the previous committee meeting, we had resolved this issue. So staff worked hard to locate opportunities and gain permission for drivers to access facilities elsewhere to remove the temptation to lay over on Willow Street. So we secured use of the toilet and kitchen facilities at 58 Wharf Street, as well as use of the Bay Court toilet facilities between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. The bus operator sent a formal letter to drivers informing them of the new operational arrangements for the CBD, and the operations team here have been monitoring the situation and have seen very high levels of compliance.
Thank you. Ken, just the question that I have for staff, and I haven't looked in the last few days, but there was still bus stopover markings on the road. Have they been taken away yet?
Yes, they have.
Okay.
Yeah.
As the Chief Nagger Office, can I say thank you very much to the staff? I was thanked our staff, but spoke to a couple of the hospos who are just absolutely delighted and really thankful. So thanks very much.
Just one other item on this, if I may, Mr. Chair. So this work allowed us to review the space that we require for layovers to support our urban operation. And where that landed was we need, at our peak, 11 spaces for layovers within close proximity of the interchange. And that is the number that we've been able to find, excluding anything on Willow Street. So just want to make it really clear that to support the urban operation, that is the space that we require. Conscious that there is going to be a lot of construction activity, so just a plea for advance notice and the finding of temporary space if anything does threaten those layovers in the future.
So the team are very conscious of that. Obviously, with the civic redevelopment, that's going to affect it. So yeah, the team are aware that we need to try and maintain those 11 spaces.
Thank you. Any further questions? There have been none. It's just an update, so that's fine. So we move on then to page 17, the chairperson's report. Mike.
Through you, Mr. Chairperson. I'll take the matter the report as read, but I will highlight a couple of points to note in here. Very quick one around the National Ticketing Solution, or NTS. Currently on time frame, I just wanted to reiterate the point that we are a participant in the project. They are the ones who run the program and the timeline for that. The current implementation for Environment Canterbury and then potentially Southland is on track, and the lessons learned from that process will feed into ours. We're currently doing some work around establishing our business requirements as a starting point for that program. It's really quite important for us in terms of the B card, or the new car that's going to be implemented in New Zealand and those machines. And at the moment, that serves as a constraint in some of the other actions we do. We don't want to buy more of the existing machines, we will retire them. And so the timeline for the implementation is still in April 2025. So that's about a year and a bit away for us to get into our new machine state. Bit of an update on that. Another one, somehow the Rotorua bus network refresh implementation got into this council's agenda. Sorry about that. Snuck through the gates. Apologies, we'll go to the other meeting. But then the Tauranga network refresh, and I think from our perspective, we needed to do a bit of an update around this. So we've put pause on this project. The project was set to increase the reliability of our network through the Tauranga urban area. What we were looking at is trying to address some of the effects of delay in our routes, particularly across about 9 of our major routes. And what we've seen in terms of the customer feedback, we've tried to input that. In the last PTC meeting, we came back and said that would be cost neutral. It's come back recently as not cost neutral. It's quite significantly more cost in order to implement those changes. The staff have tried to salvage some of those changes in a smaller amount, but again, that's proven to be difficult. So the last pressure that we're up against is a timeline pressure. We have basically a shutdown of our RITS system, that's our ticketing system, to make any changes, and we got to the point where we didn't have enough lead time in order to make those changes before Christmas. So we're putting pause on this. We're having a look at this refresh to go out next year in some other shape or form. We're looking to go back to our community and tell them of the delay and also some of the rationale, but we'll be looking to get good prices and maybe big elephant in a small chunk at a time rather than a major network refresh this time. But I think the combination of that timeline plus the extra costs that we anticipated or didn't anticipate means that we had to pause on that and reconsider what we tried to do there. That was the verbal update. So any questions to that?
Questions? Commissioner?
Thank you, Chair. So just on that last matter of the pause, what does that mean in terms of then the council delivering on its public transport mode share goals and targets? So the refresh was about patronage increase primarily, wasn't it?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So 2 key determinants of patronage is around reliability and consistency. So what we're experiencing is a degradation in that reliability. A lot of that reliability issues came from not having enough drivers for the last 12 months, but that's changed. Since we've had drivers, we've been able to implement a full timetable. So now the reliability of our system is actually dictated by the system itself now. So congestion, delays at certain points, where we've had to sort of act and put in an extra bus. It's only one way that we really can combat congestion is by putting on extra buses. And that led to quite a big systematic change to the way that we're able to operate. So in terms of that patronage, our patronage is growing. So that is useful as a background context to this conversation. And we're seeing an increased amount of people using the bus, but we'll be looking to get back to that. We're going to try and improve the reliability route by route so that we can improve our service to those customers. At this stage, we're going to need to look at the costs of that and how can we do that in a more efficient manner.
Can I just say that I, for one, have been putting pressure on council staff to find effectiveness and efficiency gains. We're going through the LTP and we've got at this stage negative funding to the tune of at least 8 million in buses. So we have to find, there's only so much money. We're not prepared to I'm not, as a councillor, not we, but I'm not prepared to put massive rate increases on our community going forward without seeing real positive outcomes. When we did the refresh, the first refresh we did, which was that largest of small sections, we actually got about $1 million in savings out of that refresh and got good outcomes. And that's what we expected. Because of what's been going on, it's become obvious to us that the bus company is trying to recoup. It's a tough environment for them as well with inflationary times, and they're looking probably to recoup some of the operating costs and through the mechanism of a changed service, and that's the problem. So this is a game of chicken and eggs, and playing hardball a little bit. I personally support staff putting a store on it, but I still want to see us finding ways to do, and it might be route by route, it might be Martua or Brookfield, do one at a time and try to find ways to get improvements, because we can't afford to stand still. But there's a few dynamics that I don't want to get into here at play, but I think we're being put under pressure by our operators, and there's still 5 years in the contract to go. I think it's 4 or 5, and if we get too hardball now, we could have a very interesting time for 4 years following it. So it's a suck and see from my point of view. Are you happy with that explanation, Councillor?
Well, no need to tell you two anything. The wicked problem is, how do we fund growth? How do we fund infrastructure, PT services with the growth without impacting our ratepayers too much? It's just over and over again, hence my comments about the smart growth funding and implementation plan being so critical. So yeah, it's another wicked problem, funding growth.
And just in the last sort of context, the Community Connectors extension update is due to be closed out by the 31st of October. It's on track, and that'll be in place. It may need to be reviewed at some point soon. So that's the last of that, and we can, if there's any more questions, or we can close that item.
Could you just tell us a little bit about the on-demand trial and where we're up to with that? On page 19.
Yeah, sure. On-demand trial is on track. I'm happy to hand it over to Ollie. He's got probably a bit more detail on this.
Yeah, very much on track. So that's looking to go live March next year. So we have procured a technology provider, and we are, I understand, talking to a preferred supplier for the operation of the service itself. And my understanding is we're bringing an item on demand to the next meeting of the Regional Council.
Thank you. And what about just informing us all about the security within the bus service?
I'm happy to talk to that. In terms of the last, since the last update, we haven't had any major incidents on the bus system. I think it is a bit like lightning. So we're not 100% sure of the causes, and we are quite reactionary in space, but we've done a lot of work, and since our last incident, also a district council around elements there, but as for Tauranga, it's been relatively quiet.
Any questions? There've been none. I'm happy to move that we receive the report. Do we have a second? By the way, one of the commissioners. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So we move then on to the Joint Public Transport Committee update report on page 22. And that, who's starting off with that?
I'll take that, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Just like to take the report as read, and between Brendan and I, we're happy to take any questions on any of the items in the paper. Thanks.
Just to update the committee, at our council meeting yesterday, we decided to delay the next parking charge area for the centre city until February 26th. We've just got a long list of projects in the centre city. So we turned the sod on the waterfront this morning. That car park's closing, and Dive Crescent extension's underway. They're starting work in the Sonic Park. We've got Elizabeth Street closing. There's about 7 others, Brendan. And we just think we're just listening to our retailers and local businesses. We just want to give them a good summer.
Yep.
So we've delayed that.
What was the delay date?
February 26th. By that stage, we'll have Dive Crescent extension will be finished. The corner of 2nd Ave, and so that demolition on that starts next month, beginning of November. So that corner of Devonport and 2nd, there'll be 100 car parks in there and a bike park. So we'll have all those extra car parks available around the city. And of course, Elizabeth Street and Tunks Reserve will be finished. So there's big car parking outside this building, and Cameron Road Stage 1 will be finished. So, hallelujah. So it gives a bit of relief to the businesses.
Councillor?
Just a couple of issues, please. Page 28, hard copy, transport emissions reduction analysis. I take it that the presentation we've just had, which was vehicle kilometres travelled, this is now morphed into this now called the transport emissions reduction analysis. Is that, so it's dovetailing into this work, is that correct?
I'll need to come back to you on that, because I think that's being handled through the strategy and planning team, not through transport directly.
It would be quite useful to know how that integrates. Secondly, on page 31, accessible streets area B, last sentence in the middle column, signalisation of Brown Street. Really?
So that's come through from obviously regional council. So Area B has closed. We're going through the public consultation feedback at the moment. There was some particularly strong feedback on a couple of key areas. So we're looking at how do we still achieve the network efficiencies but address those community concerns. And we're looking at moving from what's called transformational cycleways to potentially transitional. So there'll be a combination of some interim works with an intent long-term to go to more permanent works.
Signalisation of Brown Street.
So further to Brendan's comments, regional council staff have been working closely with colleagues from the city on this one. Certainly in the afternoon, the junction at Brown Street generates some of the longest delays that we experience on the bus network. So we did request that project look at options to improve bus priority at that junction.
Final details still being worked through, so it's a request at this stage, and we're just looking at what does the final form of the whole project look like.
Cool, that's it for me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner?
Can I just raise on page 30 under bus facility city centre and the comment that the 3 sites have been confirmed. Unfortunately, nobody had talked to the person who's actually constructing on one of the sites, and he's not very happy. He's not very happy, A, that no one's talked to him, and B, that he actually has a resource consent as part of his construction for a bus stop outside in the same location for his buses. So we are going to have to go back and have a look at it's outside the Northern Quarter, that those two, where we moved them. Remember, we did have them in Harrington and Hamilton, and we moved them into Willow opposite the northern quarter. Yes, well, it's not going to be very successful. I don't know, there might be a way we can work through, but we certainly have to go and talk to them then. And I think we should have done that a long time ago.
So if we can go, when we go into PX, we can cover that off because that development has been invited to all of the meetings and hasn't attended.
Okay, we'll bring that up later. Thank you. Anything?
The other thing just to mention is that we have had a session with Wellington City Council who are doing quite a lot of work around, and it's just accessible streets areas A and B, and doing quite a lot of work around, because the minute you go to put cycleways in and you're going into the curb, it's hugely expensive. So in some of the discussions around the local government table, we found that Wellington City was working closely with Waka Kotahi on some more transitional options. So you could be trying things out, getting a change in behaviour, and then spending the big dollars. So we've had a couple of sessions with them, and we're looking at some places where we can implement a similar. And they are transitional, so the long-term object is always to make that permanent change, but it does allow you to test some different ways in a much more cost-effective and actually put in place a lot more faster ways of supporting cycling in particular. And Jesse, I'm sure we're working closely with Waka Kotahi on that. But it's not a temporary, it's a transitional, and it's quite important that we understand that.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this matter? We'll move. We need to receive the report, the joint public committee update. We'll move.
I'm happy to move.
You'll move. Seconded, Commissioner Selwood. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried.
Mr. Chairman, just while we're on that report, can we just acknowledge not only the extent of work that's going on, because it is just massive, as our community knows, but we need to acknowledge the extent of the work. And can we also acknowledge the working relationship between our staff, which appears to be working extremely well, very professional, and I think that really needs acknowledgement. So well done, but quite frankly, it's blow away material in terms of just how much is being undertaken. So well done.
Yeah, look, I'll absolutely concur with that. Every time I meet with our transport staff, that they reiterate the improved working relationship with Tauranga City in particular, and I think from what it was 18 months ago to what it is today, I think we are able to make some really good progress, and so I thank all staff for that, because without that, it's just a circus. And yes, the city has gone through huge upheavals in stage 1 of Cameron Road and the CBD, and it's wonderful to see that it's coming. Stage 1's coming to fruition, but it's been a hell of a long haul. And can I say, Brendan, if I didn't have my scooter, if I had to come down to these meetings by car, it's just about impossible to get across Cameron Road to get into here. So I do sneakies across the grass. But seriously, if it is going to be much longer, that's something that needs addressing, is to find access ways to get from the western side of Cameron Road if you're trying to access the eastern side, because it's virtually impossible in the mid-avenues.
So I can update Cameron Road Stage 1. So it will be substantially complete by the end of the year. So all the Cameron Road works will be complete. We'll have a couple of side roads just to finish off in January. In terms of those turning movements, we've got signals going in at 9th, 6th and 3rd Avenue. And as soon as we can get those signals up and operating, that'll reinstate that sort of east-west movement. It is difficult at the moment because there is a number of intersections that are under active construction, but we're getting to that crunchy point where very soon you'll start to see those intersections reopen and be totally operative.
Okay.
Stage 2.
We'll talk about that after. So before we move into public excluded, I just want to get a feel from you people. For afternoon tea, are you happy just to keep going? And if anybody, I don't know if it's afternoon tea. There's tea and coffee if anybody wants to just grab one and bring it back to their desk. That's quite acceptable to me. What? I will. I'm just doing afternoon tea first. Okay. So